Before we get started with today's video, I just want to take you through the structure of this particular series. So we've actually partnered with Linode to bring you this series. This series will involve two parts. So if you head over to linode.com under events, you should find the HackerSploit Linode Live Linux Server Security series, and you can just click on more info here. So this series is going to be a 12-part series on how to set up, secure, and audit Linux servers. And will begin on the 1st of October. And the first series will be available on YouTube and will include SSH security essentials, configuring sudo access, securing Apache 2, securing Nginx, and the uncomplicated firewall. The second part of the series will be hosted on Linode Live, and it's absolutely free. You don't have to pay anything. And again, you can actually register for that there. This is going to be an advanced series that will build up or build off the first series, and will cover things like brute force protection, IP tables, WordPress security, and security auditing on Linux with the Linux tool. So to access that, just click on the registration link on the On24 platform, and that'll take you here. So that'll give you an idea of all the various webcasts and when they're going to be posted, and it'll give you a summary of what will be covered exactly. These are advanced webcasts that will be about 40 minutes, and you can register for them absolutely free of charge. We've also partnered with Linode to give you guys a free credit. So again, if you are interested in using Linode for your virtual private server or for your hosting, whether you're a developer or a administrator, you can get $100 of 90-day credit, and this is for new accounts. So that's fantastic. Definitely do take advantage of this if you're getting started with Linux, or you're actually following along with this series. However, make sure to actually redeem this offer or this code, which is under promo.linode.com, and the code is HackerSploit100. This offer will only be limited till the 15th of December, so definitely check that out. That being said, let's get started with today's video. Hey guys, HackerSploit here, back again with another video. Welcome to the Linux security series. In this particular series, we're going to be taking a look at how to secure Linux systems, and more specifically, Linux servers. Now, as you've read from the title, this video is going to be about SSH security. So I'll be taking you through all the essentials of securing SSH. We're not going to be taking a look at brute force protection. I'm just going to be showing you how to secure SSH and how to go about setting up SSH securely. In this particular video, or in this particular series, we'll be following a very important premise here, or an example, if you will. And the reason I'm doing this is to give the videos a bit more context in regards to how you can apply these techniques yourself when setting up a server, regardless of whether it's a personal server or whether you're setting up one for your organization or for your company. It really doesn't matter. So the way I'm going to be doing this is I'm going to be using somewhat intricate but basic examples, again, to give you a better idea of how you can apply these techniques. So in this particular case, we are going to take a simple example of the fact that I'm an administrator, and I've been hired to again manage the company's Linux servers on the cloud, and also some various on-premises servers that they have. And the development team that's responsible for developing the web applications that they have actually told me, the Linux administrator, to fire up a few servers on the cloud or virtual private servers for WordPress, for a WordPress website. So we've been given that particular role or that particular task, and our first order of business is to set up remote authentication so that the development team can connect to the server and do whatever they want. And of course, they're going to be using SSH to do this. So SSH stands for Secure Shell. It is a remote authentication and remote control protocol, and it allows you to connect to Linux servers remotely, or even Windows servers. Right, so now that we have set up the premise, we can actually get started. Now, we have partnered with Linode to actually give you guys some free credits or free access, and you can access this by going to linode.com and take a look at HackerSploit, so /HackerSploit, and that will give you a free $20 credit, so you can actually get started and follow along with this if you want to. And again, you can create as many Linodes as you want, and you get about $20, which is fantastic. Excellent, so we can now get started. Now, this is my dashboard here, and you can see we're going or following along with the premise, and these are the servers that I'm currently managing, and I have the marketing server and a project management server here. And now we've been told to create a new Linux server with WordPress installed, and we can go about setting up the security from the ground up. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new Linode. So I'll click on new Linode, and again, I can set up WordPress manually, or I can go into the marketplace here, which is a great feature offered by Linode. And I have all of these applications that again are pre-configured to work right out of the box. So I can set up a LAMP server, a LEMP server. I can also set up a PostgreSQL database, an OpenVPN instance, so that I can actually set up my own OpenVPN server. And then of course we have the game servers, which is awesome. We also have the ability to set up Docker, which is fantastic. You can actually just get started immediately without setting up or installing anything. In our case, we're going for WordPress. So I'm just going to go to the bottom. It's going to ask us for the WordPress options. So again, the development team has given us some basic credentials, and of course, we're gonna improvise a little bit. So the user is going to be user@test.com, and the admin username is going to be admin. And of course, I don't recommend doing that, but that's another topic for another video. And then of course, for the password, we're going to give it a super secure password, right? So I'll give it the best password I can. And we're going to disable this gradually as we move along, because password-based authentication with SSH is not really recommended because, you know, attackers can brute force the server or brute force SSH. We then need to provide a database password, which again, make sure that is equally as secure. And Linode gives you a password strength level right over here. And the website title, we're just going to call this development site. This is where the development team is going to just work on various betas or new web apps that they're currently working on. And we don't have a domain yet, so we're not mapping it. And the default image is going to be Debian, which is perfectly fine. I then specify the region. And of course, you can specify the region that's most appropriate or advantageous to you based on what area or what part of the world you're in. In my case, I'll just go for Europe, London, UK, as that's the closest to me. And I can then specify my plan. And of course, these are based on CPU intensive or CPU dedicated CPUs, high memory based Linodes, and GPU based Linodes as well, which is great for password cracking. That's something I'll probably want to cover in another video. So I'll click on a 1 GB RAM and 1 CPU Linode, which is a nanode, and that's about $5 a month, which is perfect. So that'll be fine for a WordPress server. And I'll just call this WordPress development. That's the name of the server. So WordPress development, and I'll enter a root password. Now you can see a very interesting thing here with most cloud providers, and you know, Linode in particular, is the ability to set up SSH keys, which we'll be doing, but there's a flaw here by default, and that is the fact that you'll be logging in directly to the server with a root user account, which is our first order of business that we want to change. So we'll stick to you know, authenticating with the password first, and I'll not add an SSH key yet because we're going to add it for a different user. So I'll hit create, and that's going to create the Linode instance for us. So I'll just wait for that to provision and to start, and yeah, I'll just wait for that to complete. All right, the Linode is created, so we can actually get started. So I'm just going to copy the IPv4 address here, and we're going to log in using OpenSSH or the OpenSSH client. Now, as I said, I'm currently using Linux, Ubuntu to be specific. And of course, you can log in with various other, you know, SSH clients, like you have PuTTY on Windows. And of course, you have the OpenSSH client installed by default on macOS, I believe. And on Linux, it's pretty much the same. So you want to make sure you have the OpenSSH client installed. So sudo apt install OpenSSH, and we want to specify the OpenSSH client, I believe. There we are, and I'll just specify my password here, and that's going to tell me it's already installed. Fantastic. So to authenticate via SSH, we say SSH, we specify the username, and we'll paste in the IP of the server, hit enter. That's going to ask us for the root password that we specified. So I'll just specify the root password here, and we are logged in. Fantastic. So now that we have access to the server, we can get started with our first priority, which is to add another user. Because if I currently list out the users on the system, you can see apart from the other service-based user accounts like MySQL users, which is for the database, and data, you can see that we only have the root user and we don't have any other user accounts, which is a problem, because when we talk about the root account and permissions in regards to the power of the root account is like the administrator account, which means you can pretty much do anything. And if an attacker is able to get access to the root account remotely, they pretty much take over the entire system. They can change passwords for the users. They can delete databases, dump contents of databases, so on and so forth. So our first order of business is to disable the authentication, remote authentication to the server with the root account. And the way we do that is, first of all, we segregate duties on the server, right? So for the development team, we'll create a user for them so that they don't have to use the root user to log in. So to do that, we use the user add command. So user add, and I'll say M to create a home directory, and we specify the shell, which in this case is going to be bin bash, right? And I'll create the username, which is just going to be dev, and I hit enter. So we've added the user dev, and if I just print out the users now, you can see at the bottom we have the user dev right over here, and the home directory is listed as home dev. So the next thing we want to do is we want to assign a password to the user dev. So I say password, and I specify the user dev. So I say password dev. It's going to ask us to specify a password for the user dev, which I will do. And there we are. So we have now added the user dev, and we can try and switch to that user by using this super user or switch user. There we are. So we say SU, and we move on to the dev account, and you can see we can log in directly. And if I go to the home directory, you can see we are currently, PWD, we are currently in the home dev directory here. We can also switch back to the root account like so, and it's going to ask us for the root account password, which works out fine. So our first order of business, as I mentioned, is to log in, or is to disable authentication, remote authentication with the root account. And to do this, we need to take a look at the SSH or the OpenSSH daemon configuration file. Because the thing you have to understand about SSH, it is a client-server based connection, which means there's the client and the server. This particular server is running OpenSSH server, so we need to configure the OpenSSH server settings. So we'll use an editor. I'm using Vim, you can use Nano. So we want to go into the etc directory, so etc SSH, and we're looking for SSHD. Now the reason we're looking for SSHD, the D represents the daemon, which essentially means the service or the server service, and we're looking at the SSHD configuration file. So we're just going to hit enter. And this is the configuration file over here. Now, there's tons of options that you can change, and these options are not related, only to security. They also pertain or are also related to things like networking. We can change the default port that the service is currently running on. That's also very helpful sometimes. And of course, there's tons of other options that we can change. Now, the option we're looking for is an option called permit root login. Now, the interesting thing you'll see about this file is the syntax that is used. Now, by default, within configuration files, a hash or a pound symbol represents a comment, which means that line of code or that line is not active. Now, if you see a line without a hash or a pound, that means that that line is currently active. In this case, all the lines with hashes or pound or the pound symbols means they're left to their default values, and OpenSSH will actually use that by default. So any custom options will not have the pound or the hash symbol. In this case, permit root login is set to yes. We want to disable that to no. Now note, this does not mean we cannot use the root user. That's something we'll be disabling in another video. This just means we cannot access the server via SSH using the root user. After this, we'll only be able to access it using the dev user. So we'll say permit root login to no. We want to say no to that. And then to save this file, I'll just use W and Q to write and quit, and we can now quit. There we are. Fantastic. So now I can just exit from the server. So I'll just exit from both users. There we are. And if I try and access the server using the root user again, you'll see something interesting happen here. And of course, I think I'll be able to authenticate because I haven't restarted the service. So I'll just do that right now. So sudo system control. Restart SSH, and that will restart the service. And if I try and log in again now, it's going to ask me for my password, and if I enter the password, it's going to tell me I'm unable to authenticate. So we'll just wait. There we are, permission denied, try again. And that doesn't necessarily mean that my password is incorrect or I've done anything wrong. It just means that I cannot log in to the root user with a password. I cannot authenticate with the root user via SSH. And of course, you can see that option is explicitly defined within the configuration file, because it does offer a reprieve in terms of security, because a lot of attackers will target the root account because it offers the lowest hanging fruit. Right, so that means we can only access the server via the dev user. All right, so I'll open up the dev user right over here. Fantastic. So I'll specify the password for the dev user, and I have access. And of course, I can switch back into the root user if I want to by saying su root, and there we are. Fantastic. So again, I can always access the root user, but that's something we'll also want to be disabling, because the dev user, if compromised, can still in some way access the root account if they have the password. In most cases, that's not going to be the case. But now we have to secure the dev user. And the way we're going to be doing that is by using SSH keys. Now, as I said, we can set up SSH keys by default with a cloud provider like Linode. However, that does it for the root user. We want to do this for the dev user. So we are slowly segregating and lowering our security risk, because we're setting up users based on privilege. And number two, we're also increasing the amount of authentication security in place. So to get started, what we want to do is I'll open up a new tab in my terminal here. And we want to generate our SSH key. Now, you can generate your SSH key very, very simply on Linux by specifying SSH keygen. So if I say SSH keygen, like so, you can see it gives me the ability to generate a key. So SSH keygen, I can then specify TRSA, that is the algorithm that is being used. And on Windows, you can do it. You can also generate your SSH keys using PuTTY if you want. And I'm going to hit enter. And it's going to tell us it's generating the public private RSA key pair, and it's going to save it into the default home directory under SSH here. In most cases, you just want to leave that as it is. So I'm just going to hit enter, and it's going to tell me it already exists, and I'm going to overwrite this for a very important reason. I'll hit enter. Now, SSH keys also allow you to specify a passphrase. This is like two-factor authentication, because in addition to your SSH keys, you can also secure them with a password. So if someone gets a hold of your SSH key, they'll not be able to authenticate without that particular passphrase. In my case, I'm not going to enter a passphrase, so I'm just going to hit enter, right? And your keys are going to be stored within your home directory under SSH. And the file is going to be called IDRSA. That's your private key. And you have idrsa.pub, which means public key. And we can list out the contents of my SSH directory here. So SSH, and if I list it, you can see we have the private key. This is what we want to keep securely. And we have the public key. Now, of course, when we talk about the public key, as I said, we need to copy this onto the server. So how do we do this? Well, we can copy it manually. However, a much easier way of doing it is through a utility called SSH copy ID. So we say SSH copy ID, and then we specify the user that we want to authenticate as. So dev at, and then I paste in the IP of the server, and I hit enter, and that's going to copy our public key to the server. So we're just going to wait for that to prompt us to authenticate with the password. So it's going to say enter our password for the dev user. So there we are. It's going to now tell us the number of keys added is 2, right? So we've added 2 keys here, and there we are. So we've added our key, and that means we can now authenticate to the authenticate to the server without entering a password for the dev user. That's only for us. However, a password-based authentication is still available. So I'll just explain this to you shortly. So if I try and log in to the SSH, to the server via SSH using the dev user, you'll see that I'll be able to log in without entering a password. So I'll hit enter. It's going to use my private key. And again, we'll just, sorry, that is an incorrect IP. Let me just paste in the correct one, which is this one right over here. If I just paste that in here, and you can see I'll now be able to authenticate without entering any password. There we are. I'm now logged in as dev at the Linode instance right over here. So I didn't have to enter any password, although password-based authentication is still set up. Now, if I try and authenticate using another system, like my Windows system with PuTTY, and I'll just open up Linode and copy the IP there, and I try and log in, I'll just open up PuTTY again, like so. You can see that it still is going to ask me for my password. So I'll say you log in as dev, it's going to ask me for my password, and I can still log in regardless of whether I've set up an SSH key. We need to remedy this. The way we remedy this is by disabling password logins or disabling password-based authentication. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to minimize that, and I'll switch into the root user. So I'll say su root, and it's going to ask me for my root password. There we are, and we'll go back into the SSHD configuration file. So we're looking into the etc SSH and SSHD configuration file, and we want to go all the way to the bottom here, right over, it should be over here, under authentication. We have changed permit root login to no, and we just want to go slightly to the bottom here under disable tunneled clear text password. So to disable tunneled clear text passwords, change to no here. So for password authentication, we want to disable this. So we again will just get rid of the pound or the hash symbol, and we're going to set the option to no, right? So we'll set that to no. Now, what this means is that under no circumstance are we going to be able to access this server using passwords. The only way we're going to be accessing this server is through our SSH keys. So that's something you want to take into consideration before you activate this particular option or this particular setting. Make sure you have the SSH key available, because there'll be no way you'll be able to get access to this via SSH then. So I'll write the changes and save it. And again, in this case, I'll just restart SSH. So system control restart SSH, SSH like so. And if I now exit or I log out, again, on this system, I'll be able to log in without the password because I have the SSH key, and I can then share this SSH key with the development team, and they'll be able to log in using the SSH key. So if I hit enter, you'll be able to see, there we are, I have access. I still have access here. However, if I go on over to my Windows system and I try and log in using PuTTY, so what I'll do is I'll just open up a new session here. I'll close that one. And I'll just copy the IP one more time here just to make sure I have the right one. And I'll open up PuTTY. Let me just load my profile, hit open. You can now see if I try and say login as dev, it's going to give me an error telling me no supported authentication methods available, server sent public key. So again, that means that now on this server, there's no way we are authenticating with any password of any kind, regardless of the user. So again, we've disabled the root user logins, which is very important. Number two, we've set up and secured the other user account, which is the dev user. The only way anyone is logging onto it now is through the SSH key. And of course, as I said, the SSH key is going to be under your home directory in SSH. And it's the file that is in that we're referring to is the ID RSA key right over here. So this is the file you want to share with the development team, and again, they can then use it to log in. However, as I mentioned, it's very important to take into consideration the fact that you want to keep the private key as personal and as private as possible. That's the reason it has the name private. Now, of course, in the next videos, we'll be talking about giving the dev user account the appropriate permissions to run administrative tasks like installing software, updating software, and we'll also then go a step further by disabling the root account permanently so that you cannot even switch to it in the event an attacker is able to compromise the system through one of the lower privileged accounts like the dev user. They'll not be able to get access to the root account. That being said, that's going to be it for this video. Let me know what you thought in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'll be seeing you in the next video. I just want to take a moment to thank all our Patreons at patreon.com/HackerSploit for all the support. Your support and help is truly appreciated. You keep us making newer and fresher and better content. So I just want to say thank you to all the Patreons. So thank you, Murph the Surf, Daniel Bork, Jonathan Kyle, Adam Mack, Jamal Guillory, Dafim Bari, Jeremy Nikolai, Mary Hara, Max Chow, Dustin Umpress, Michael Hubbard, and Jerry Speds.